Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. So I have ulcerative colitis, which is a form of inflammatory bowel disease. I've talked about it a bunch on YouTube and the surgeries that I've had to have and the fact that I live with a stoma bag. But in this video, I wanted to talk about how having IBD impacts sex and relationships. So this is actually a topic that I dove into and researched when I was doing my sexuality educator training course. We had to write an essay on some kind of health issue and its impact on sex and relationships, so I chose IBD. So I wrote a whole essay on it and also presented a webinar on the topic for other students, and now it's becoming a YouTube video. A couple of disclaimers before we get going. I am not a medical professional, and also I'm going to be using the language that is used in the research papers, which is very gendered and cis-normative. There's no mention of trans patients, so I'm going under the assumption that when they talk about men, they mean cis men, and when they talk about women, they mean cis women. So first off, what is IBD? IBD stands for Inflammatory Bowel Disease, and it is a chronic illness and an autoimmune disease. In my layperson's understanding, that basically means that your immune system attacks your own body because it thinks that it's foreign, not actually part of your actual body. So there are two types of IBD, ulcerative colitis, which I have, and Crohn's disease. UC is in the large intestine only, and it can affect anywhere from the rectum to the whole colon, and the disease is continuous. Crohn's disease, however, can happen anywhere along the GI tract, so anywhere from your throat to your bum. It is most common in the small intestine, and it is non-continuous. So this means that you might have patches of disease in different parts of your GI tract and they're not necessarily connected. They're both mostly treated by a lot of different kinds of medication and also sometimes surgery. Surgery can be curative for colitis because if it only happens in your large intestine, you can remove the whole large intestine, bam, disease gone. But for people with Crohn's disease, surgery is often not curative. So IBD symptoms vary massively from person to person and also throughout an individual's life. You might have extreme flares and remissions, or you might be constantly managing symptoms. The way it manifests is so different from person to person. But common symptoms are abdominal pain, a lot of bloody diarrhea, weight loss, and fatigue. There are various different medical and surgical treatments with the main aim of controlling the disease and its impact on someone's quality of life, which includes sex and relationships, or it should include those things. Roughly about 500,000 people in the UK have IBD and 1.6 million Americans have it. So it's not a super common thing, but a lot of people have it. So let's get into sexual dysfunction and IBD. Okay, so when I'm talking about sexual dysfunction here, this is how sex researchers define sexual dysfunction, and there are scales and they have names. So there is the Female Sexual Function Index, or the FSFI, and there is the International Index of Erectile Function, or IIEF. These are essentially surveys that people fill out and self-declare how they score on different things like desire, orgasmic function, erectile function, satisfaction, lubrication, pain, a whole host of things. So in the general population, about 30% of cis women report some kind of sexual dysfunction, but in women with IBD, it's 45 to 60%. And 5% of cis men in the general population report sexual dysfunction, but amongst men with IBD, it's 15 to 25%. So folks with IBD tend to have more sexual dysfunction than folks without. What's going on there? What are the causes of sexual dysfunction in IBD patients? So of the research that I read, there seems to be three main things that get discussed here. One is the severity of disease activity, and this makes a lot of sense to me because if you're somebody who is still able to function mostly in your day-to-day life and occasionally you get some abdominal cramps and you have to rush to the bathroom and you have diarrhea, that is going to have less of an impact on your sex life than if your disease activity is like so severe and you're in an acute flare that you have to be hospitalized. That is going to have a massive impact on your sexual function. And then obviously there is like everything in between that as well. The second cause that comes up a lot is body image issues. And this is because the body is seen as this source of pain and poo, and there is a lot of stigma around that as well. Generally, the disease is not perceived as very sexy and doesn't make you feel very sexy in your body. And then also with surgery issues, stomas and scars, that can all have a massive impact on somebody's body image. And someone's body image can have a big impact on their sexual function. And then the third thing is mental health. And this is because IBD patients report higher rates of depression and anxiety than the general population. There's a lot of debate in the research as to what is more important, disease activity or mental health, but actually it's really hard to detangle those issues because they are all so connected, and we really need to look at patients holistically. If your disease is really bad and it's impacting your daily life, that can have a massive impact on your mental health. But then also, and this is purely anecdotally from me as a patient who has received a lot of advice from doctors over the years, I have been told over and over again that my mental health can impact disease activity. So if I'm stressed, that could trigger a flare-up. So who's to say? Chicken or the egg? Mental health, disease activity? It's really hard to tell. And it really would be a case of medical professionals taking each person holistically as an individual and their individual case to figure out what is going on there. So we got some IBD sexual function specific scales. There is the IBD male sexual dysfunction scale, or IBD MSDS, and the IBD female sexual dysfunction scale, or the IBD FSDS. There are so many initialisms in research, it is painful. So this questionnaire asked IBD patients if their sexual activity was impacted by symptoms such as abdominal or pelvic pain, fear of appliance leakage, fear of passing stool, body image, anal bleeding or discharge, fatigue, and the impact of the disease on sexual desire, preventing them from having sex. In the men, 27% of them said that IBD prevented them from having sex. And in the women, 2/3 of them said that IBD causes them distress in their sexual relationships. So it's not looking good for IBD at the moment. But let's talk about IBD surgery and body image. According to the NHS, 1 in 5 people with ulcerative colitis need surgery, and about 60 to 75% of people with Crohn's disease need surgery. There are a lot of different surgeries, especially for Crohn's patients, but we're going to talk about 2 of the main ones. Ostomies, or stoma surgery, which is what I have, and ileal pouch anal anastomosis, or IPAA, or what we're going to call pouch surgery. I have some images from Crohn's and Colitis UK, who are a wonderful charity, to help explain some of these surgeries so that we all know what's going on and we're all on the same page. So this is an image of a colectomy with an ileostomy. So as you can see, the large colon, which is the bit in bright orange, is the part that is removed, and then you have your stoma, the ileostomy that comes out of your body from the small intestine. This is what I have. My rectum remains. This is what it looks like from the outside. There is the ileostomy. What fun. But of course, you're not just walking around with your stoma out and about and just pooing constantly. You have a stoma bag. And so that's what this lovely illustration demonstrates. And that collects your poo. This one's really similar, but this is one where the rectum is also removed, and this is potentially in my future. And then this, what we're looking at here, is the colon has been completely removed. You've got the closed ileostomy. So this person had an ileostomy to begin with, and then they removed that, stitched it back up, and then what they've done is they've created an internal pouch system. So this is the J pouch out of the small intestine. And so you still poo out your bum, but it's not your rectum or large intestine. It's just like some small intestine tissue. And once again, not a medical professional. But there we go. These are the main ones that we're going to be talking about: stomas and pouches. So generally, there needs to be a lot more research on body image and IBD surgeries because there really wasn't a lot of stuff out there. But here is some of the stuff that I did find. Body image is lower than in the general population in 70% of IBD patients. And in our IBD DS study, so this is the IBD female sexual dysfunction one, there were 25 patients in that study who had stomas, and 100% of them, every single one of them, reported low body image. And for people with vulvas, surgery is associated with genital pain during intercourse. People with pouches tended to have better body image than those with stomas, probably because they didn't have a bag of poo hanging out on the outside of the body. Sometimes you do get a choice in terms of what surgery you get. Other times you don't. Okay, let's talk about fertility and IBD. People of any age can get IBD, but it is usually diagnosed between 15 and 40. So these are your prime reproductive years. There's no evidence that inactive disease affects fertility, but active disease could. And in my personal experience, anytime that I had a flare-up of my disease, my periods would stop. So my body was just like, we got better things to be dealing with than trying to get pregnant right now. And then also the research talks a lot about voluntary childlessness. I always find it really funny the terms that researchers decide to call things, but from my understanding, voluntary childlessness isn't quite child-free by choice. It definitely does include people who are child-free by choice, but from the research that I read, it also sounds like it includes people who otherwise would want kids, but for whatever reason, fears or disease activity is preventing them from making that choice. And also IBD patients have fewer children than the general population do. So why? One of the most common reasons cited is simply a lack of information and education given to IBD patients about fertility. IBD patients have a lot of assumptions and fears and doubts about fertility in terms of adverse pregnancy outcomes, risk of IBD in children, and the safety of medication during pregnancy. There's little evidence that the disease itself impacts fertility, but when you look at all of the other stuff that can come with it, like mental health or decreased desire or poor sexual function, then you can kind of see how it might. And then in terms of surgical impact, pouch surgery in people with wombs increases the risk of infertility threefold. And that has been one of the reasons why I have not done that yet. No, thank you. It's also been found that AMH, which is anti-Mullerian hormone, which is the marker of ovarian reserve, is generally lower in Crohn's patients. But I couldn't really find anything about what's going on there. And also there is a medication called sulfasalazine, which reduces mobility and increases the proportion of abnormal sperm. That's everything that I could find about fertility and IBD, but I'll just give one little piece of advice here, which is if you do have IBD and you have any of these concerns, do talk to your doctor, talk to your consultant about the fact that you want to have kids, and it may be a case of stopping a medication, trying to manage the disease, giving you more information, figuring things out. Get whatever support it is that you need to do what you want to do. On a different note, but continuing the theme of interesting ways that researchers phrase things, let's talk about receptive anal intercourse and IBD. I mean, it is an accurate description. We all know what we're talking about here, and it is a very important area of study, I think, but it is one that is very poorly studied. Not many people volunteering to study anal sex and IBD, alas. So in general, it would be very useful for doctors to know if receptive anal intercourse, or RAI, is something that their patients are engaging with. And that's because RAI runs a higher risk for STIs and anal dysplasia in IBD patients. But because there is a lot of stigma around anal sex and a fear of judgment, there is a really low disclosure rate. But that responsibility shouldn't just be on the patients to disclose. And actually, there is no clear medical guidance for screening so that doctors can find out if their patients are having receptive anal intercourse. Doctors would be able to provide proper information and proper treatment. Inflammation in the rectum could be a sign of IBD, or it could be a sign of STIs. But let's also talk about the impact that IBD can have on your sex life if anal sex is one of the things that is on your sex menu. Pouch surgery can make it really difficult and painful, and that's because there is a risk of increased damage to the intestinal wall. Your pouch is a lot more delicate than a rectum, and I wouldn't advise doing anything sexual there until you've spoken to your doctor, a medical professional who can tell you what's what. That I am not qualified to do so. If you have a stoma and your rectum remains, hello, like me, then it's largely unusable. And then of course, if you have a stoma and your rectum removed, there is no hole there. And many people who have this kind of surgery refer to it as their Barbie butt. So that removes any kind of anal sex or anal play completely off the menu, unless the scar tissue there feels nice to be touched after it's healed. I don't know. But I want to give a big shout out to Leslie Dibley, who in 2014 conducted some research interviewing gay men with IBD about the impact of the disease on their sexual identity and sexual activity. And there are just some really wonderful and eye-opening quotes in this that I just want medical professionals to hear. And also, we love to see medical research being done on people who aren't just all straight. Okay, so these are some of the things that these gay men said. So in the information leaflets, there is always a section saying sex and relationships. And it says, oh, it doesn't affect your sexual life. You can still continue to have sex with your partner. And you're like, well, I can't because, you know, I've got this pouch. And there we have it, like heteronormativity, compulsory heterosexuality in like the medical leaflet material that is handed out to patients. No, thank you. Do better. The only concern I ever have really is that people may judge and think IBD is related to being gay and the whole anal sex thing. And this is that like compounded stigma, one of being gay and anal sex and the stigma there, and then also with IBD and poo and just all of that stigma wound up together. I feel robbed of the choice. I feel robbed of that flexibility within our sex life. And yeah, that can be hard when suddenly something that was part of your sexual repertoire is now just like no longer possible. Okay, let's talk about sex and relationships support for IBD patients. So let me hit you with some stats. 8% of IBD patients had said that their doctor had asked them about their sexual health. And 93% of gastroenterologists said that it would be a good thing to address, but only 16% had. Some of the reasons that doctors gave for not talking about sex was a lack of knowledge around sexual dysfunction management, a reluctance to shame patients, which I think is a really interesting one, but that probably comes from that lack of knowledge, discomfort from the doctor, again, more shame, and a lack of time. The approach that researchers suggest for this kind of support is a biopsychosocial one. So bio, this is looking at the body, looking at sexual dysfunction, what is going on with genitals, with body parts, like the physiology of it all. But that is by no means the whole story. So the psycho part of it, that is the mental health side of things, and obviously how all of these different things are connected. And then social, that comes down to values and relationships and society and stigma. And so the ideal situation is that we can create a network of support for IBD patients that covers all of these bases. And like I said at the beginning, the aim of treatment is to control the disease and improve somebody's quality of life. When it comes to chronic illness where there is no cure, managing the disease and maintaining some kind of quality of life are the most important things, and we cannot ignore sex and relationships when it comes to quality of life. So I asked folks on Instagram who also have IBD to share some of their experiences of how their IBD impacts their sex life and relationships. I have a stoma, and so I feel unattractive and uncomfortable. I'm really sorry. Constant worrying when going out, bloating, feeling exhausted, self-conscious. There were a lot of mentions of bloating. My male partner really suffers with body confidence and libido after multiple ops. So much prep. Timing when I'll have digested enough to have sex without ruining vibes. Yes. I feel sexy when partner likes to put my suppository meds in for me, makes it fun instead of shit. I love that. I love taking like this moment of care and like making it erotic. I think that's really cool. When having a flare, I don't feel like my body can cope with sex. Totally valid. If flaring, minimal sex, but my partner is always there with a brew and a hot water bottle to ease pain. I rarely have sex with my husband. I'm in pain and feel unattractive, so not interested. During a flare, I feel physically and emotionally drained, and it impacts my sex drive. Will often find myself trying to plan sex around meal times and eating. I've been very lucky and it hasn't. I told my now husband when we were just friends and chatting. Yeah, that's another huge theme that comes up a lot, which is disclosure of like when you tell people that you have IBD or a stoma, because there is a lot of feelings of shame and embarrassment around having a disease that is about poo. Fistula can have terrible impact on sex life when they cause pain/leaking, the worst. Badly, the symptoms can be relentless. You feel unsexy/not in the mood for long periods. Also difficult for your partner to truly understand when from the outside you seem fine. Yes, oh the joys of having an invisible disability or illness. Couple of times mid-sex I've had to stop and go rush to the toilet. Kills the moment. Toilet habits in a new relationship. When I spend ages trying to poo, it can be awkward. Oh my goodness, yes, there is so much like etiquette around dating and like using somebody else's toilet and like farting around people. But if you have IBD or any kind of digestive problems, it's a whole different ballgame. Man, the bloating can be such a big thing for body image confidence. If I'm in a flare, I'm not interested in sex. I'm tired, I'm sore, it's not what I want or need. When I'm in a flare, I'm very weak and my partner has to help me with a lot of things. Hospital and illness trauma impacts my mental health and therefore my relationships. You know when the relationship is fresh and you don't fart around each other yet? Ouch. Very ouch. Oh, just let it rip. Let it rip. Here we go, this person decided to let it rip. Farting in front of your significant other in the honeymoon phase. It makes anal sex impossible most of the time. So much shame. I'm embarrassed about my body, my symptoms, my medication, you name it. Unsolicited advice here, but one of the things that helped me with not feeling shame, especially around the medication side of things, was getting a really cool, funky looking pill pot, like keychain thing that I would put all of my meds in that I had to take. I don't know, it just lightened it for me. It made it feel cooler. Long stretches of no sex, feeling guilty about it, anxious, he'll just find someone else who isn't broken. You're not broken. Pain, fatigue equals no sex, sometimes for months. This is where my sexual currency video may come in handy, because the amount of sex that you're having isn't an indicator of overall sexual or relationship satisfaction. If you can't have sex at the moment for whatever reason, whether that's IBD or whatever, then focus on sexual currency. Too scared to try anal. I feel you. My partner and I talk about bathroom trips a lot. So romantic. Having to reach a point where you trust someone to not leave you over your toxic farts. Less confidence going out and trying new dating experiences if unsure of toilet facilities. Huge one, yes. Terrified of shitting myself in bed. Self-conscious about smell and cleanliness. I had a stoma bag leakage and there was poo everywhere in our bed 6 days after we moved into our new flat together. The mattress was 6 days old. You know, it happens. It's not fine, but it's fine. My libido disappeared since having UC. Hard to feel sexy. UC here, but apart from bloating, currently not many issues. Sex before dinner is the solution. Anal is a no-go. Having my partner administer an enema, not fun. Used to struggle to orgasm because of pain, trauma in my abdomen and below. I've been a bit scared / hesitant to go out there and find a partner because of my ostomy. Sometimes partner has to also take on the role of caregiver. Yeah, that is so true. And health in relationships ebbs and flows and nothing is permanent. And at some point, you're gonna be looking after each other. Or one of you is going to be looking after the other, or somebody else is going to be looking after both of you. It's just life, isn't it? All right, what have we learned? IBD fucking sucks, and there is a lot of stigma around poo. But with the right support and medical care, we can reduce the impact on quality of life as much as possible. IBD can have a big impact on sex and relationships, body image, and mental health. But also, it doesn't have to. Talk to the people in your life, open up about how you're feeling and what is going on, whether that's friends or family or your partner or your stoma care nurse as well. Stoma care nurses are amazing. And also, you don't have to settle for care that is only looking at disease activity. Find the support that you need that takes a look at the big picture of you as a full human and all of your different wants and needs. Mental health, relationships, intimacy, all of these things are hugely important too. Again, stoma care nurses are amazing, and also look into charities like Crohn's and Colitis UK. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you found it interesting. Thank you so much to my patrons as well for supporting me in making these kinds of videos. If you would like to join our lovely community, you get early access to videos, lots of bonus content, and a special private Discord server where we all chat. And some of you patrons will actually remember all of this content from when I practiced doing my webinar with patrons before I did the webinar version of this for my course. So thank you for letting me also practice on you back then. I hope that you're all doing well, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!